All right, all right, all right. It's coming. Hang on, hang on. Why am I so far away from the? Why is the board all the way over there? Oh, I was cleaning. Right. All right. Let's see if we move that over there today. Let's see if that makes a difference. All right. We're gonna try. My ear. You're gonna have to forgive me. I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm gonna try putting the monitor in my other ear. Let's just see if I can. That's better. Okay. Let's do this thing, shall we?
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
What the fuck is that?
Hey yo.
Oh man, what a day! Just what a day. How are you doing? You good? You all right? I'm getting through the day. You're gonna have to bear with me. I sound like this primarily because I have a cold. I don't know if it's the plague. It might be. Who knows? I mean, I'm not dead yet or anything, so we're just gonna deal with the fact that I sound a little like this. It's not you. It's me. Mostly it's like the right side of my face. It's just a pile of congestion. So we do the best we can with what we have. And here we are, all the same. Tonight is, it's not a do-over because it's a fresh week, but I apologize. Let's start there. I apologize for not being in your face and in your ears last week. There were scheduling issues, and I just could not, for the life of me, sort that shit out. But here we are tonight, and we're good to go. All things look peachy keen all across the board. And, yeah. So how about we hit that intro? How about we get started with this? I think so. Let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, enthusiasts of all kinds, people who appreciate trees, people who appreciate nice underwear, anybody who's ever had to deal with really strange people in their inboxes, anybody who's had to deal with having to go back into their offices one day a month, anybody who's had to deal with the strange demands of really any boss, people who like peanut butter, people who appreciate toast and rice, but not at the same time, that's weird, people who appreciate a good piece of chicken, people who appreciate a nice taco, a majority of people who enjoy tea and who make recommendations to their friends as to what tea they should like, lovers of video games and butts, Team Armpit, and most importantly, the comrades. Welcome to the Writers' Chat for, I'm looking at my clock to make sure I got the date right, April the 27th. And I, through no fault of my own, continue to be John, the writer next door, Twitch's only writing coach. Somehow no one's come and claimed that title, nor have I fought anyone in a Thunderdome or Highlander style. So here we are yet again, the murderer of Pitmad, back loose, roaming the internet to answer your questions about writing and editing and publishing and marketing and helping you be creative. I'm pretty excited. I don't know how much voice I have. I don't know how much gas I got in this tank, but we're going to drive this car till the wheels fall off, right? So how about we just get started? Let's just see what happens. Let's just answer some questions. Here we go. First question. How can I quickly increase the quality of my opening scene? All right. It kind of depends on what your opening scene is, because there's no universal way to do this, right? It's not like no matter what, follow this one blanket rule. Every opening scene is going to be roughly different, and even if you have dialogue scenes versus exposition up front, there's no guarantee that the same fix is going to apply to everything equally. It's just, we can't guarantee that. Everybody's going to make art differently. So what we need to do is establish the most common baseline possible for our opening scene. And that's plain and simple going to be, you want to start where some action is. Do not bore the reader, and I don't care whether they're a consumer or an editor or a pimp or a publisher or your critique group or whomever else. Don't bore them to tears setting up everything so that eventually, if they just keep turning pages and keep reading paragraphs about the history of such and such and so and so, eventually they'll get around to the action. There has to be something. There has to be some kind of engaging action. I'm not talking like this is the sentence where the big giant monster is defeated. I mean, just have something happen. A person walk across a room, a phone rings, a car blows up, somebody says a line, somebody has a thought, somebody has a feeling. Some sentence, some paragraph that can be expressive, that can be evocative, that can hold somebody's attention. I got to take this out of my ear. It's just rattling me. It's what I get for having a cold and trying to record, but here we are. You want to have in that opening scene something somewhere early on, first couple paragraphs that stand out. You don't want to, let me tell you for 11 sentences, 15 different ways that the carpet was lush. No one's going to care. It shouldn't take that long to say a thing. Just make the point you want to make and keep us moving. Start where the action is. Start where there's something to hold and grab our attention, and it will automatically make the opening scene better. This doesn't mean you've got to give away everything or spoil it or force a flashback. Like, don't overcomplicate this. We're not reinventing the wheel. You feel me? We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to find something to grab the reader early on, and you can carry them forward from there, okay? You can do this. Just find something that isn't 5 paragraphs about the traffic and the weather and the birds and the grass. I understand those things are important to you. I understand that you wrote the hell out of them. I get it. But your reader doesn't know and doesn't know how to care about the stuff you already know and already care about. How are you going to start them caring about the sum total of everything you have going on? Yeah, you're going to start that with something strong in your opening scene. That's how you do that. Great first question. On we go to the second one. Oh, a business question. That means we're going to get a mouthful of tea first. Otherwise, I'm going to start coughing. You're going to see me do a lot of that tonight. If you were making an anthology, what steps would you take? First of all, I have made anthologies. They're nightmare hellscapes because they have a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved and a lot of stuff going on. They're not automatically bad. Don't take that to mean they're bad. Just there's a lot going on. So here's what I would do from the jump. I would decide if I'm going to do a digital release or a print release, because that's going to radically affect steps down the road. But if I make that decision early and I stick to it, it's going to make my life a lot easier. Second thing, once I make that decision, I'm going to figure out what the hell I'm going to have an anthology about. Anthologies, for whatever reason, no matter what genre we're in, no matter how many people we got, whatever, there's a theme, there's an idea, there's a vibe, a feeling, a concept, a world, something, I don't know what else to call it, some element of fiction that weaves all the stories together. Either they're all about the same kind of idea, or they're all on the same planet, or they all have to do with the same topic, or they all start with the same sentence. There's some kind of common ground for every single story. Figure out what that common ground is. And it can be anything. You want to make it about it, everybody's got to use the same opening sentence. Or it's all got to be about what happens if this event in history goes a different way. Or it's all about different things in a single location, or it's all got to be the same 2 characters. I don't know. Whatever it is that you're going to unify all the pieces in your anthology, sort that out. Next, after that, you're going to need to figure out how many authors you have working on this thing. Because we want to figure out the number of authors first, because that's going to tell us how many words each author is going to get to write. It can be very tempting to go, oh my God, everybody I know, I'm making an anthology. And then you open the doors and like 1 million people come rushing at you. But understand that the more authors, the greater the number of authors you bring into this, the harder you're making all the future steps. Also, the more people you bring in, the lower your quality goes. Why? Because you're going to have to do more work down the road when it comes to editing. And if you're going to let everybody and their mother come through the door, you're going to see a wide breadth of creativity that might not be up to the sort of standards you want. So limit the number of total people. Remember, your anthology is still dictated by genre constraints. So if you're writing a science fiction fantasy anthology, you want to keep it, not huge. You want to make sure you're under that 100K epic fantasy label. So you want to aim for 60 to 99,000 words. And if you want to give every author a decent amount of words to work with, you got to divide that 60 to 99,000 up in an appropriate amount. You don't want to go too small. You don't want to be like, everybody gets 1,000 words, because that's just going to look kind of lazy, like you didn't really give a shit. You didn't really plan this thing out. You just sort of slapped this thing together. So we don't have that. But you also don't want to be like, there are 3 of us and everybody gets 33,000 words, because that just seems like you couldn't figure out how to co-write. So you're doing like the next best thing, which isn't so much lazy as it is amateurish, which you also don't want to deal with. So you want to find a reasonable number of people and give them a reasonable word count each to move forward. Then, the next step, you need to figure out how you're going to contract and pay these humans. Why? Well, you should never do any work for somebody else without a contract. I don't care what it is. It's not really debatable. It's not, I'm not going to argue the finer points. If you do work, you should get paid. And if you're going to do work on a thing with other humans, there should be a contract involved so that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, how things shake out, what happens when shit goes sideways, how this works, how that works. It's just straightforward stuff. So once you figure out how you're going to pay them, note. Hang on. Where's my note button? Do not pay them out of a successful crowdfunding campaign. Do not make their paycheck for their work on what was a draft at one point contingent on whether or not it's publishable. That's some lazy bullshit. That basically says, well, we just kind of throw it up to the wind and whatever happens, happens, which tells everybody else that you don't give a shit about writers. You don't care about anything. You just want the attention and the press and the idea somehow that everybody's going to throw cash at you. But if nobody knows who you are, you got to live and die on your rep. And if your rep is, well, I don't pay my authors, I don't pay the people I work with, I don't have contracts, I don't do shit, in a straightforward manner, who's going to want to hang out with you? Who's going to invite you to the table? Who's going to let you do anything going forward? Contract, payment, non-negotiable. How much payment? All right, first of all, it's going to be by the word. And you're asking me, so I'm going to tell you, you better pay at least 15 cents a word. Do the math. Honestly, 20 cents a word would be delightful. Have you seen the world out there lately? Have you tried to buy rice, eggs, and milk at the grocery store? 20 cents a word is just fine, thank you. And if you put it contingent on, a good Kickstarter for every piece of paycheck, it's not going to work. Because now all of a sudden you just farmed out your marketing department on people desperate to get paid. That's lazy. Don't do that. So, you get your contract, get everybody paid and sorted out. You tell them how many words you want it to be. You give them whatever structure you need to give them in terms of guidelines. You need it to be this many words. You want page numbers. You don't want page numbers. You want headers. You want footers. You don't want headers or footers. You lay out your submission guidelines however you want, and then you give your authors deadlines. They need deadlines. This is not because they're bad, dumb, or lazy. It's just because you're on a ticking clock as a publisher of an anthology. So you give them some deadlines, and that deadline is probably going to be in multiple parts. Part 1 is when you turn in a draft. Part 2 is how long you have after that draft gets revised or edited. And then part 3 is going to be the final, like, send me the finalized thing date. But before or concurrent to that, you need editors. Assume that for every 5 people working your anthology, for every 5 writers, you need about 1 to 1.5 or 2 editors. So maybe it's easier to say for every 3 authors, get 1 editor. You don't want, now, hang on. Now, if you have like some ridiculously tiny word count, like everybody gets 50 words because you have, the entire population of the city of, Sheboygan suddenly all working together in an anthology, I guess, then maybe you can reduce the number of total editors because each edit would be fairly short. But at the same time, 3 writers per editor across an anthology spaced out well over time is a pretty low stress threshold. And it also gives that editor a chance to really dig in and give good feedback, because the position you don't want to be in as an anthology maker is the idea of like, I have 1 editor and 100,000 words and 6 days. As an editor who has done 100,000 words in 6 days, it's exhausting. Something breaks somewhere in this part of the brain, and it's no fun. And then you just sort of sit there like an old person at a senior home, just kind of drooling, staring out the window, looking at the sun. It's not good. You want to make sure you have more than enough editors to compensate and deal with the workload, because the work you're going to get, especially if you open the doors for the vast and sundry masses, the work you're going to get is going to be of varying quality. And those editors have a very difficult job in trying to make those writers who have maybe never done anything like this before, trying to get those writers to sound like, oh, they knock this shit out every week, which takes time and effort. And then the next part of this, along with the editorial decisions, is you got to understand that if you're dealing with a lot of new people, they may or may not have a lot of experience taking feedback. So when an editor turns around and says, hey, this doesn't work, or this is a problem, whether it's a big problem or a little problem, you have to be prepared for somebody just losing their mind and absolutely positively tearing you a new one as the publisher of the anthology, ruining their dream of being a published author by, reminding them that you can't have that many run-on sentences. It happens. It's happened to me. Editorially, the hardest part of this is sorting out the high-quality pieces that you want to promote and use from the pieces that are just kind of there, from the pieces that are unacceptable. You are going to have a wide swath of talent here. Plan for that. No matter how big somebody talks, or maybe in spite of how big somebody talks, expect a whole, I'm loath to use the word spectrum, but expect a whole range of talent. Then you get it edited. Everybody submits their stuff by the deadline. It gets edited, turned around, and sent back on a different deadline. They make their changes, send it back, get it all prepped, and then it's finalized and it goes to layout. Now, here's what I would do. I would budget twice the amount of time for covers and layout and proofing that I did for editing and revising. However much time that is, just take that, double it, because that's going to be your later stages. Because in that stage of cover development, proofing, organizing, and layout, that's where you're going to start marketing this thing. Why didn't we start marketing it sooner? Well, you had enough on your plate. So let's do it now. And you're going to start that marketing aggressively. I cannot specify that enough. I cannot say that strongly enough, mainly because I have a cold. But aggressive, B-E, aggressive. Like a high school football team, aggressive marketing is here. You're going to use newsletters, social media, whatever your platform of choice, owned by whatever billionaire oligarch you want. Go to town. Vary the number of posts you make. Vary which posts you make. Vary the times. Vary the platforms. Vary what they say. Range it out. You want to be somewhat comprehensive. The thing you want to avoid at this stage is performing your marketing inside what's called a closed loop. Closed loop, if you're unsure of what that means, is the community you're marketing to either were already on board to buy it, or they have no interest in buying it, and there's no new people coming in to see your marketing. So, for instance, if you are, let's say, gathering your anthology authors from a Facebook group or a Discord community, marketing to the Facebook group or Discord community is somewhat of a closed loop because those people already are invested in some way, shape, or form with the anthology. They're not necessarily going to buy it. In fact, as authors, they're entitled to receive a free copy. Factor that into your budget. So don't fall prey to the idea of, well, I've got 60 people in my Facebook group, I'll just market it to that. That's 60 people. No, those people don't count. Some of those are people involved in the making of it. You shouldn't have to market the thing they're doing to them. They're already working on it. You don't need to do that. That's extra. Don't do that. What you want to do instead is go out and find new people, which means all those techniques we talk about in marketing videos that you might find over there. Where's my thing? Way over there in the corner for the YouTube channel. All that stuff we talk about for marketing and outreach and growing, especially the social media stuff we talked about a few weeks ago. Use that information. Grow your platform. Do something about it. Don't just talk to the same 10 people over and over and try to maintain that slowly fizzling out hype train. Try to keep everything moving forward and organized. From there, you want to budget your crowdfunding. I'm assuming you're crowdfunding. If you've got investments or somebody else supporting you behind this, you can skip this step and just roll right out to press. But if you're going to crowdfund it, how are you going to crowdfund it? There's many platforms, many strategies. You're going to need a video. You're going to need some kind of engagement. You're going to need probably some marketing help writing the sales copy, unless you're good at it. You're going to need to figure out tiers and distribution channels. How are you going to get this book to people? How much are they going to pay? How quickly can you expect to do this? Always plan 30 or 40 more days than you think to whatever windows you're providing. I'm saying this as somebody who's got boxes of books behind him that he's still shipping out for a product that's many years gone. Always factor in more time and more money the more physical your product is. How much time? More. How much money? Double your numbers. Especially now with all different kinds of pandemic and post-pandemic stuff happening, double your math. Does that make your numbers really big and scary? It should. Should that give you pause in doing this? It should. Especially if you're new. Especially if you're like, we're new and we're going to make some real complicated, fancy physical product. Don't. Go digital. Do a couple digital anthologies. And then all of a sudden you'll be the people who put out 6 digital anthologies, finally now doing a 7th in print. Play to your strengths. You don't have to try and compete with the highest level people right off the bat. Play to your strengths. Little by little by little, incremental success stacks just as well as big giant success. That's a huge lesson I wish I learned many ages ago. I would have just gone all digital and called it a day. But I was dumb. I thought I knew better. I thought I could do it. I needed help. So, last note, get as much help, if not more than you think you need. Pay that help or support that help as best you can when you can. But absolutely don't feel like you got to brave this alone or it's a one-person job, because anthology production, let alone most book production, is not a one-person job. I made myself really dizzy shaking my head. Ugh. All right. What a great second question. On we go to the next. John, if I'm self-publishing, does my word count really matter? Oh, that's a very good question. Not really. I mean, kinda, but not nearly as much as it does in traditional publishing. So maybe we should start with, why does word count matter in traditional publishing? Those people in chat who have been around for a while know this answer, but word count matters because it leads to the amount of pages that get printed, which lead to the weight of the book, which leads to the shipping cost of the book, because heavier books cost more to ship. So by controlling the number of words, you're controlling the number of pages. By controlling the number of pages, you're controlling the size of the book. That's why word count matters. Also, there's some level of general expectation of like trying to make everybody's book somewhat homogeneous in size so that it can be, placed on a shelf. Granted, this is older thinking. This is, brick and mortar store days, big giant monopoly days, old-fashioned thinking. But it still holds true because, as we've talked about in, so many videos and so many lessons and so many conversations, traditional publishing is a bunch of dinosaurs that have just now realized that there are birds in the world. So don't expect them to suddenly be up there going like, oh man, the new iPhone, or holy shit, what's Bluetooth? They're dinosaurs. Bear that in mind when it comes to setting up their goals and expectations. Now, when you're self-publishing, you don't have to worry about any of that shit. You could go make your own thing. You can defy genre. You can just put your books out and they can be impossible to classify, but hey, they're out and you could sell them. And as long as your marketing is sound and you kind of know what you're doing, or you learn along the way, you could have a career. It might not be a big, giant, glamorous, super mega career, but you could have a career. But does your word count matter? Not nearly as much as in traditional publishing, but it does matter in one regard. It helps set reader expectation. So, for instance, your reader, your possible consumer, the soon-to-be purchaser of your book, is out there looking for your fantasy novel, whatever it is. I'm just going to assume it's a fantasy novel, or your romance novel, or whatever you're writing. They're used to seeing that genre of story more or less be around the same size. Oh, 80,000 words, 90,000 words, maybe a little over 100, 110, maybe. But if all of a sudden you hurl out there with like something big and massive, 400,000 words for your fantasy story, 160,000 words for your romance novel, and you just roll it out there like, here's my book, here it is. Before they even crack the cover, they are immediately going to be struck by the idea of, well, this thing isn't like all the other things I'm used to. There must be something wrong with it. Now, I don't know if there is or not, but I can often tell you that if you've got, 500,000-600,000 words, you probably have more than one book kind of sandwiched into one manuscript file. But that's situational and depends on what the hell, what you're writing. It might also come down to you just need to stop writing and cut, learn how to cut things, because writing is the act of making decisions, and one of those decisions is what not to put in the book. But you have that. You don't want to, go out of your way to force that number. It's not a hard number in self-publishing. Oh, it's 80,000 words. I have to stop at exactly 80. Nah. You can go over. Just don't go so far over that you give this sense of oh, you're a self-published author who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. I got to stop shaking my head. Who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. So, you're just going to slapdash any old thing out there and call it a day. Don't be that author. Don't be that person. You feel me? You understand why? We're trying to not reinforce the dinosaur's stigma of, oh my God, self-publishing is for the losers of the publishing world. We're trying not to perpetuate that. We don't want to let the jocks stuff us dorks in lockers. We're trying to do better than that. So let's do better than that. Your word count doesn't super matter, but it matters enough to give an impression to a consumer. Also, you as an author have to learn not to run at the mouth. I don't know how else to tell you this. If you are routinely breaking 200,000 words, no matter the genre, Ooh, you got to learn how to slow down and make better choices. Okay? Okay. Let's go press a button. Are there any questions from anybody in chat? Oh, thank you for your very nice comment about that social media platform video. I'm really proud of that one. What about an anthology of your own short stories that you're putting together? Well, a lot of that's going to be, how do I answer this question? It's a great question. I'm not skipping on you. I'm trying to phrase it in a specific way. You're going to follow the same rules. You're going to follow the word count issue. You're going to follow the same structural idea. You're going to weave it together. You're going to find stories that are similar beyond just the fact that you wrote all of them. That's not enough. Find out what makes each story. Now, I'm going to use the word connect, but that it doesn't mean that story A needs to relate directly plot or narrative or character-wise to to story 2. It has to connect in the sense that it's, yes, you wrote all of these, but what else ties these things together? Where's your through line? Is it thematic? Is it expositive? Is it situational? Like, why these stories? Why are these stories put together? If you do that and you keep it within your sort of word boundaries, your word count boundaries, you'll be fine. You generally want to have more than 2 and probably less than 10 or 12. Maybe you could push it to 14, but overall, you want to try to keep it small. It gives you a chance to use your longer pieces, weave them together, fix them, polish them, revise them. But by and large, it's the same format either way, except you're not going to, maybe you'll write yourself your own contract, but you're still going to need it edited. You're still going to need a cover and a layout and all that stuff. Same process otherwise, though. Good question. Could I give an example from a recently published book of a good opening scene? Ooh. That's a great question, only because I have immediately drawn a blank on every piece of fiction I've read lately. Let me grab, of course, my Kindle is still charging. That's in the other room, and I don't want to get up and walk away from the microphone, so bear with me for a minute while I look at my reading list, and I will tell you of one. Hang on, let's see. So okay, here we go. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, is that recent enough for you? In one of the newer Star Wars books, Star Wars, the Light of the Jedi. It's the first one by Charles Soule, who just got hired as a creative consultant for Lucasfilm today. But over there in Star Wars, Light of the Jedi, it's a Star Wars book. If that immediately disqualifies this opinion, I'm really sorry, but it's a great example. You want to 2 years is perfect. Okay, I think it's 2 years. It might be 3, but it's still fine. That story starts with a problem occurring in space. And then the rest of the chapter, and it's a fairly short first chapter. The second chapter is longer. But that first opening stuff is real brief and real broad, but it starts with there's something going on, and this one ship that they're describing is about to be struck by this asteroid or meteor or space rock. That's the sort of thing that's engaging, something that happens. If you're going to go with dialogue, which is fine, it's not the end of the world that your story starts with dialogue, please don't make it boring dialogue. Like, yes, no, thanks, Develop it. Do something with it. I understand that the second and third and fourth and fifth and whatever sentences are going to do the heavy lifting to spell that out. I get that. But you could have made this a lot easier for yourself and just not started with, You could have started with an action, some kind of action, some kind of thing for the reader to picture or think about. good when it comes to opening scenes is so broad and subjective. And that's by design, because there's tons of ways to do it. What you want to do, especially if you're questioning, hey, is my opening scene any good? Try to answer this question. What happens? Does anything happen to the characters? Anything. Like, do they tie their shoes? Does the volcano explode? Do they have a snack? Does something happen? And can you describe it in a way that puts a picture of some way, shape, or form in the reader's head? Whether it sets mood, or tone, or theme, or introduces a million people, that's secondary. Important, but not critical. But you at least have to grab the reader's attention by painting a moving picture, a movie in their brain theater. And if you're starting to question, oh my God, is my opening any good? Guess what? You probably know the answer to that. Good questions, though. Anything else? While I drink more tea. Oh, man. Whew. All right. On we march. Question number 4. What kind of tea tonight? Oh, it's real boring. It's real boring. It's just green tea. It's just really strong green tea. I'm just trying to stay upright for you guys. Oh. It's what I had. I just grabbed a box off the shelf. So it is what it is. All right. Question number 4. How can I help my book cover stand out? Well, for starters, you can spell your own title and name right. I can't believe I have to say that into a recording, but it often helps to spell your title and name right. Beyond that, think about where you position the text relative to the image of your cover. Why do you have your title oriented the way it is, the direction that it is? Why is it in the place that it is? Why that font? Why that typographical decision? Why have you laid it out this way? Let's look at this. If you're watching the video, this is going to be a really probably much clearer thing to do. Like, why is the camera over here? I can move it left and right and up and down and wherever I want, but why did I put it here and not in the dead center of the frame? Same is true with the little green graphic for the question. Why are things in the position they're in? You need to know that. You need to know why. If you're wondering why the graphics are in the way they are, it's because previously in the other questions, I was over on the other side and I switched over for this side. But you need to know why the things are positioned in the cover they are. That's item number 1, let's call it. Item number 2 is what the cover itself is. So if you're writing a big giant space story or the planets and spaceships, if you're writing a character drama, what visual imagery, whether or not it's representative of the stuff in the book, is not entirely relevant at the moment. I mean, you can do that. That's okay. But at the same time, you want to make sure that there's at least a vibe if you're not going to directly, reference a scene in the book. But what imagery do you pick? And how do you want it represented? What art style is your cover artist using? Or what art style are you going for if you're doing your own covers or you're compiling it from stock imagery or something like that? What is your visual trying to convey to the reader? Is it too busy? Is it trying to convey too many things and failing to do that? Is it trying to say one thing and it's clear or one thing and it's not clear? Did you pick something, or is it just, oh, well, my story is called, I'm going to make something up here. My story is called Hummingbird, and the cover is just a stack of waffles. There's no waffles in the story. The waffles don't represent anything. It was just, I saw this picture of waffles and I liked it. And the title has nothing to do with the picture. That's not really going to help it stand out. It sounds like it could because it's real surrealist or far out. But at the end of the day, how am I supposed to tell everybody, hey, check this book out? What's going to help your book stand out is a clarity of message to make sure that all the pieces are working together. It's a strong title. It's not 50 million words with 4 kinds of punctuation. It's not a title like everybody else has a title. The X of the Y, or X of Y, or X in Y, or X preposition Y. Like, you're doing more than just having the same kind of title like everybody else. All you did was swap a few words out. That's a consideration. The next consideration is whatever other subheadings you've given it. For example, this, you might have title of book, subheading number 1, the first episode of the subheading number 2, this name of series, and written in such and such, taking place in this and that world. Like, you might just stretch and complicate all this stuff, and the reader doesn't care because the reader has no frame of reference for any of that until after they've finished the book. Because hopefully, if you've written a book that is, the first episode of such and such a cycle in this such and such a series, you've written that first book well enough that people want to go to the next book. Because if you haven't, it doesn't matter. Also, don't clutter your book cover with extra stuff. The picture, the title, and your name are doing plenty of heavy lifting. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and hyper-complicate this. And it doesn't matter if we're talking pen name or your name or whatever. Just get something out there. Make sure you spell it right. But what's going to help it stand out is uniformity and clarity of message. Everything working together. You've picked a nice font. You've picked a good color. It stands in contrast to your image. Your image is clear. It conveys something of the story. Not necessarily a spoiler, but a vibe, a tone, a feeling, a theme, a sense. And it goes from there. That's going to help your book cover stand out way more than making sure you specifically have like a tree or one specific thing, because those trends come and go. Example of a trend that comes and goes. Some years, houses, like silhouettes of houses with like lights on or creepy splashes of color really stand out. Other years, it's smoke, like just sort of writhing tentacles and roiling clouds. Other times, it's flowers or blood. These are trends. Don't chase them. They just sort of exist, and we move on from them. Okay? Good question. On we go. Oh boy. Why can't plot be moved forward in dialogue? The shorthand for this is plot does not live in dialogue. I'm sure some of the people in chat have had me write that in their comments. Plot doesn't live in dialogue because dialogue is by design reactive. It's where characters react to each other, to the environment, to what just happened, to something that's going on around them, to the potential of the world going on around them. It's reactionary. It's one person turning to the other and going, "Did you see that?" And the second one going, "No, I didn't see it. What happened?" And the first person re-explaining it. When you have to have a character say the plot, you are conveying 2 things. 1, you don't know what else to have the character say. 2, either the character or the reader or both are so colossally stupid that you have to keep reminding everybody what the hell they're doing. Here is a great example of why this is so bad. So in that last Indiana Jones movie, the one with the aliens, there's a moment where they're literally driving a car towards the third act, and Indiana Jones, a character known to be smart, turns essentially to the camera, but also to the other characters and goes, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're doing A, we're doing B, and we're doing C," while they're driving the car to do A, B, and C. The visual hasn't changed. The stuff they were doing before Indiana Jones opened his mouth hasn't changed. They were already going to go do A, B, and C. Why would your character need to say it? It's already happening. And why would your character need to say it to the other characters who are also present when it's already happening? plot can't move forward in dialogue because plot requires actions, conflict, stuff going on. When there's no stuff going on, it's hard to move the plot. And you can't just talk about it. Because if I talk, okay, yeah, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish this cup of tea. I'm going to put on my bathrobe and I'm going to go to bed. That doesn't mean I've done those things. The plot didn't move forward. I just talked about it. Talking about a thing and doing a thing is not the same. Ask literally any woman I've dated. They will tell you talking about a thing and doing a thing are not the same thing. Be careful and prudent when talking about plot via dialogue between characters. Now, there's a question in chat, a good question. Could I use, I'm assuming, plot in your dialogue as a setup to not do that? Meaning, do you mean like we're going to talk about the plot so that it doesn't happen? Yeah, you could. As long as your dialogue was, not big, giant blocks of text, you could totally do that. I think if I understood your question correctly. If I misunderstood your question, let me know. But yes, you could set it up that way. You could totally set it up that way. Just make sure people don't speak in like big, giant blocks. Because people normally, outside of streaming environments, don't speak in big, giant blocks. Remember, with your dialogue, people have to sound like people. So think about how long every sentence is going to be. Think about how many, it's going to come down to how many words, but it's primarily because of how many sounds, who says a lot, why, how many words, how complicated a sentence is it. These factors matter. Make sure that characters on the page sound like regular people, that conceivably your reader, lost in their imaginative world as they are, could walk out their front door and encounter your characters on the street, and they would sound exactly the same as if they were walking across the street and saw their neighbor. Make your characters sound like people. Okay? Next question. Oh my God. It's gentle advice. Gentle advice. I can't seem to grow an audience. Where should I get started? Okay. Anywhere? Anywhere. You got to start somewhere. So, what are our options? Social media. Your own website, which arguably could be social media. Any kind of community you're a part of. Any kind of community you want to be a part of. Start somewhere. Okay? Now, in terms of what you do, that's going to depend on one very, very important factor. Have you done anything? Because if you're trying to grow an audience without at least having started the production of your creative endeavor, you're going to have a much harder time because you don't have anything to sort of build that audience towards or build that audience on. If you're trying to get people to sign up to your newsletter so that you can sell them a book, you better have your book. The hard part here, the wrinkle here, is that I often tell people, hey, you want to start this process early. And that may give the impression, I'm afraid it gives the impression, that like you want to start like day one, draft one. And that's not necessarily the case unless you really know the people that you're marketing to very well and they're otherwise engaged elsewhere. What you want to do, what you want to look at, what you want to deal with is having some creative material done already. And I don't mean done like, oh, I'm in my third draft, I'm about ready to submit this thing. You can have a first draft. That's fine. You just got to have something. It doesn't even need to be complete. It just needs to be something. Because that something is what you're going to be talking about to more and more people in more and more ways at more and more times to grow your audience. If you're doing that already and your audience isn't growing, one of three things is the case. One, You are not doing enough to go out and reach new people. Now, I don't know if that's because of fear or just uncertainty or you're just not sure where those people are, but you're probably not doing enough to outreach, to go out and find more people to hear you say whatever it is you're going to say. 2, you're not talking to them in a way they understand. Like, you've got this romance novel, but you are talking to people who don't read romance novels. There is a miscommunication constantly happening, and the more you try to force it, the worse it is. It's sort of like when you go somewhere and you encounter someone who speaks a different language, and you try harder to just make yourself heard, or they try harder to make themselves heard, but you're fundamentally not communicating in a compatible way, so it's just not really clicking. 3rd thing, how you're saying whatever it is you're saying isn't working. So you might have the right group of people to pitch your science fiction fantasy novel to, and you might have, an active number of people that's constantly growing. But in terms of the type of message you go at them with, let's say you come on real strong, real hard sell. Hey, look, almost like a wrestling promo. Hey, look, brother, if you want to, get this book, you want to do this, this, and this, check this out, do the blah, 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 whatever it might be. But if this is a fairly laid back audience that you are, to the best of your awareness, you constantly have to kick in the teeth in order to get moving. Like, hey, could somebody do this thing, please? Oh, please. Oh, please. Then your hard sell is going to create some distance and pushback because these people are not hard sell people. Let's go over those 3 things again. 1, you're not doing enough to grow new people, so everybody's already heard your message and decided. 2, what you're saying isn't connecting with the people you're saying it to. You're aiming for the wrong audience. 3, the pitch itself, the growth thing you're doing, isn't connecting with them because of how you are producing it. The words coming out of your face are not the best words for the job. And sometimes, it is worth pointing out, for some people, it can be all 3 of these things. You can be saying the totally wrong thing to totally the wrong people in totally the wrong way and not bothering to really grow. And that's why your audience seems to sort of sit at whatever plateau you're stuck at. Great, great question. All right. Shall we march on? Let's march on. Are there any other questions from anybody in chat? Again, while I pour tea in my face. Oh, man. Melvin? All right. We will march on. Question 7, a technical one. Love a good technical one. I feel like I should make a sound effect for technical questions. Can you walk me through a discovery beat and how to make one work? Sure, absolutely. For those that don't know, a discovery beat is one of the kinds of beats in a story. There's discovery, there's investigation, there's dialogue, there's emotion, there's action, there's conflict, there's revelation, there's all these different kinds. Depending on who you read, depending on your sources, you'll get anywhere between 6 and about 40 different names and types of beats. Do you, the writer, need to know the exact name and label of each beat? No. I mean, this stuff's not really covered in quizzes and tests. You're not going to get graded. Your editor doesn't really care if you know or don't know. The important thing is that your editor should know, mainly because your editor should be able to point out to you, hey, you need an action beat here, and you've got some other kind of beat here. So a discovery beat, pretty much the name gives it away. It's where a character makes a discovery. Now, if that discovery is physically looking through things, or if the character receives information, somebody else says, hey, did you know that tomorrow's dinner is probably chicken? It's new information to them, and for whatever reason, They've discovered it. Now, it can be intentional. They can be rooting through trying to find a thing on their own. It can be unintentional. Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. It can be explicit, where you literally have words like, John searched through the filing cabinet. Or it can be implicit, where you're not so much describing the action all the time in every sentence. You've got a couple sentences for that, but you've got a lot more sentences talking about how the character feels as they do this. It can be a big deal discovery. It can be a major revelation where you're like, really absolutely positively like revealing, oh my God, that's his sister? Or it could be something really benign like, oh, that's where I left my keys. Not every discovery needs to be like huge and earth-shattering. It's just the fact that your character, your point of view character, just so we're clear, your point of view character is acquiring information that prior to this beat they didn't have. It's a discovery beat. How do I make it work? Well, the discovery had to be caused by a want or need for information. And the discovery creates, once you have it, now that I've discovered it, what are the consequences? What comes next? I just discovered, oh my God, that's where I left my keys. What's the consequence? Now I can drive the car. The consequence, again, does not always have to be this big, giant, massive, oh my God, earth-shattering thing. It can just be, well, the discovery prompts action, a decision, or both. Okay, I know where my keys are. I'm taking my keys. I'm getting in the car. I'm driving to the store. Or it could be, oh my God, the discovery of this one clue. I now know who the killer is. Or the discovery of, oh my God, it was, this guy's really going to double cross us. Holy shit. That matters. It works when the information leads to consequences. It does not work when the discovery, no matter what it is, kind of gets brushed aside and not immediately acted on to some degree. Like, I'll just make some numbers up. You have a discovery beat in chapter 6, and you talk about it and craft it in such a way that it seems significant. You spend a lot of time and space and page on it, and then all of a sudden nobody does shit with it. And then next thing you know, oh my God, here it is 25 chapters later in the climax, and it's coming back. That's not how do I say this? That doesn't automatically mean that you're just like really super clever. It's going to come across like, oh shit, I forgot about this thing and I brought it back just now when I remembered it. You want to not end up in that situation. Not a good look, hard to fix editorially. It often leads to rewrites. But the function of a discovery beat is to have the point of view character gain information. It works when they gain information and then do something with it or about it. That's how it works. And it can be a big thing, a little thing, a super critical thing, a small thing that has 15 other discovery beats sort of connected to it. Like, oh, we're making this clue plus this clue plus this clue plus this clue leads us more and more and more down into the mystery. They're not only for big things, not only for small things. They can be scenes. They can be half of scenes. They're beats. They can be beats. Okay? Good stuff. On we go. 8. What is air in dialogue, and is it important? Air is the idea of two people not constantly talking over each other. Air is space. It's silence. It's not immediately answering one big giant blob of text with another big blob of text. If you would like an example of not a lot of air in dialogue, where everything kind of feels right up against one another, go look at Gilmore Girls. That's like the infamous one. Or maybe The West Wing or Newsroom, any Aaron Sorkin stuff. Because both Aaron Sorkin and Amy Sherman Palladino, she wrote Gilmore Girls. The two of them have a real habit of writing very fast, very high speed, very dense dialogue. Oh my God, I'm going to tell you this thing. You're going to tell me this thing? Yes, I'm going to tell you this thing. Here you go. That thing? Yes, that thing. Wow, really? That thing? I had no idea. Here's a funny, snarky quip. Oh, that is a very funny, snarky quip. I'm going to reference it now in this paragraph. Oh my God, that reference you just made was very funny. Ha ha ha. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It can be suggestive when you have less air in things that you want scenes to speed up. Or it can be, oh my God, I think a lot of myself. So my characters are very chatty because I need you to know how great I am. Yes, I made finger guns podcast, people. Finger guns. I need you to know how clever I think I am and how great I think I am. So I have written all this dialogue to be read and for you to understand. For I am the great and mighty writer. Air in dialogue is really important because one of the most common problems, especially with newer writers when they write dialogue, is that they tend to overwrite the dialogue. There's too many words. And I'm not just talking like you don't need the that or you don't need the had. I mean like you have extra sentences. You have an awful lot of wells, yep, yeah, nope, yeah, well, no. All those filler things. I'm not saying universally take them out. I'm not saying take them out at all. I'm saying be sparing with them. Put a few in, leave a few out, trim it. You want some air in your dialogue because it gives the reader a chance to read the thing and have it sit in their brain and solidify a little and then turn around and get used. It is the Whedon effect. Yes, that is exactly what there's a thing in chat about the Whedon effect. I love some Firefly, but he is guilty of making the dialogue overly clever. Yes, it is the Whedon effect. Isn't it funny how it's most common in white dudes? I wonder why that is. If only we could possibly think of a reason. But you need air in dialogue. Learn the value of having characters respond to one another without more words. Nods, gestures, body language, shorter sentences, fragments, fewer adverbs, and let time and space pass. You don't constantly have to write. You're not writing, unless you're writing a screenplay, you don't have to write big giant blocks of text per character. If you're writing a screenplay, hey, guess what? You got to write some blocks of text. But if you're writing a novel, you don't need to just pack everything into everybody's words. What that's going to do is give the reader the impression that you're really self-conscious about writing exposition. And two, it's going to make the story feel really shallow because the impression most writers give when they maximize dialogue and minimize exposition is that the world has frozen. But yet everybody is still stuck in place and talking. And then when the talking is done, maybe they move a little. And then more people talk. And it feels very choppy. And it feels very stiff and disorganized, even if you mean it to be very organized. So you need air and dialogue to give it that sense of people communicating. Because, again, outside of streaming things, when two people are talking to each other, there's a natural rhythm and a pause and a cadence where one person speaks, then the response, then there's a few seconds, etc., etc. That's air. You need it. Put more in. Why don't we go to question 9? Question 9. Am I allowed to get political in my story if it's not a political thriller? I really wish I didn't have a cold right now, so I had more air in my lungs, because normally this is a rant bell topic. So let me at least reach over without coughing and ring the rant bell. And I'll give you like an abridged rant. How's that? Okay. Abridged bell. You absolutely positively can, must, and should get political in your story, because no matter what your story is, all art is a political statement. And I don't mean it's just about American liberals versus American conservatives. It's not just about labor and Tories or whatever other single binary choices we're talking about when it comes to things. Your art is a reflection of who you are and what you feel and how you believe and how you think and what you think and what you put your stock in and what you care about and what you despise and how you want to see the world and how you do see the world and what you like and what you love and what you hate and what you want and what you need. Your art speaks for you long after you are worm food in the ground. All your choices, all your statements speak on some level, in some act, either in favor of or in contrast to the social climate of the time, which by and large is political. So if you say, and forgive me for using a well-worn internet trope, you say, I like vanilla ice cream. Somebody's going to jump on you and go, well, that just means you hate strawberries, right? No, I just said I liked a thing, but I didn't cover all these bases. I didn't come at it from all these comers. I didn't answer this part or cover this thing or expect this or expect that. Your decision wasn't intended to be political, and it's not that other person's fault that they blew your shit out and then forced it, because that's on them to project. But all your choices and all your art and all your decisions and all your goals and all your plans bear with them either acts of revolution or advancement, perpetuation. Your acts are revolutionary. They're here to challenge something. They're here to provoke something. They're here to change the status quo, to get someone to examine something, whether in themselves or in the world or about how they feel or about how they think. You're trying to provoke and lead someone. You're not just there to collect a few dollars from the sale of your thing. You're trying to get somebody to do something, move, give a shit, do something like that. Or if you're not looking to actively go out and rattle the cages and rage against the machine and provoke some thought and give something that moves them and give them something that they'll want to give to their kids or tell 5 other people about, if you just want to write for the sake of writing because you like writing, you don't want to rattle the status quo. You want to keep everything kind of nice, even, and smooth. You are perpetuating things that they are. You're not looking to challenge or question too much, which is a different kind of political choice. It's not a bad one, just a different one. And just because you see the word political in the question does not mean that politics is the only kind of political we have. Some forms of social media, some human beings walking the earth will want to tell you it's the same thing all the time, but it's not, because that's fucking stupid. The issue here is that if you have particular views, you can either intentionally or unintentionally express them through your art. You don't have to go out of your way to do it. Sometimes it just kind of sneaks out when you don't mean it to, based on how you write or don't write something. And just because it's a political thriller does not mean that all your politics have to live there. If you're writing, for example, if you're writing a single point of view female protagonist space opera, you are making some statement about how you feel women should be represented in fiction. If you are writing a queer or LGBTQ plus non-binary romance novel, you are suggesting on some level how you feel about those issues and those elements. Your art is political. It doesn't need to be tied to a party. It doesn't need to be tied to a particular politician, because all parties and politicians should be dragged through the street because they're useless comrades. But by and large, you can get political in damn near anything and everything you do because you already are. Great question. More tea. Any other questions from all of you very fine people in chat? It's so nice to see you. I hope you guys are well. Give me 1 second while I check Twitter to make sure I I got all the questions onto graphics. And I think we're good. All right. On we go then. Oh my God. Question 10. Oof. What's wrong with writing a sarcastic main character? So there's a name for this now. I'm so excited. There's a name for this. This is called the Ryan Reynolds effect. I don't know if you know this, but Ryan Reynolds plays one character. Ryan Reynolds. And there are just varying degrees of how overt or how high the volume is cranked up on that. Whether we're going from Deadpool to, well, what was that other movie? The one where he was in a, like, was it Safe House? The Safe House? Where he's not quipping as much, but just a little. The problem with writing a sarcastic main character, especially for those people who are making like he's going to be the main character in a whole ass series. After a while, sarcasm gets annoying because it becomes expected. Oh, what smart ass thing are you going to say now? What quip are you saying now? Oh, ha ha, ho ho, hee hee. The problem with that in the long term is that it suggests that your character is forever sarcastic. And to pull the character out of that frame, to suddenly have them go serious without any kind of grounding or development or plan, is going to feel very weird. This is why, for instance, it was really hard for a while to see Adam Sandler as like a semi-serious actor. Like he had to wade into those waters before he could do Uncut Gems. He had to, stumble around a little in some romance stories and stumble around a little in like Punch Drunk Love. And even that was kind of a stretch for him. But over time, we just sort of accepted. Or Jim Carrey is another great example. Jim Carrey was notorious for fart jokes and humor. And then all of a sudden, he'll throw like The Truman Show at you. Granted, yeah, he did kind of like leave Earth for a while. But sarcasm creates the idea that your character doesn't really have a lot of like emotional connectivity to other people and situations around him or them. I shouldn't just gender it, although I got to tell you, an awful lot of writers out there are just writing 25 different flavors of Deadpool. Sarcasm is best used in small little doses for small little purposes. What's the purpose of sarcasm? To reduce tension, to give a little catch your breath moment for the reader. If your character is constantly sarcastic and you are constantly undercutting all the danger and tension of your story, how much of a risk are they really in? If they got time to crack jokes, how bad could things be? Writing a sarcastic main character kind of locks you into this idea of no matter how big you swear the stakes are, they're cracking so many jokes it can't be that big a deal. Be careful with your sarcasm. It'll get you into trouble. Also, you can't always make jokes. Some things just don't fundamentally work in story structure with humor. Because again, you're trying to have serious moments. If you make jokes during, let's say, an action scene, that action feels a little slower. You have jokes during like a serious dialogue conversation, it's going to feel real lopsided. Because, well, why isn't that one character taking it seriously? There's nothing outright wrong with it. I'm not saying avoid it. I'm saying use it sparingly. And if you think a sarcastic main character is your best inroads to your audience, you think your audience is stupid. You just haven't said so out loud. Sarcasm is not the only bridge to your audience. And you should not only assume that your audience is here for sarcasm. Thor Ragnarok was ruined by too much humor. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I will tell you that there was, I don't know if ruined is the word I'm stuck on. Ruined is a big word, man. I think too much humor let some of the wind out of the bag, let some of the steam go. It cut a little bit too much of the tension away. I wouldn't say ruined. I mean, it could have been a much more dramatic, intense story with a little bit of humor on top. Instead, we got a lot of humor with a little bit of tension in it. But yeah, humor is the crouton in your salad. You don't want to have a whole salad of croutons because that's a different kind of salad. You want to just kind of sprinkle it on top a little bit. A little goes a long way. Be careful with your sarcasm. So many serious moments were deflated by random jokes. Yeah, I could see that taking you right out of the movie. I could see that. Absolutely. Part of that comes down to trying to change tacks, because Thor went from like the Dark World and Kenneth Branagh to that. And that seems to be the trajectory we're going forward with now. So we had to like hard steer the boat. We had to like really wrench the wheel. I can't think of driving terms. We had to turn the car real hard and kind of Tokyo drift our way into a different direction. But yeah, jokes should be more sparing. Unless you're writing flat out comedy, at which point they should be more precise than sparing. Good stuff, though. Question 11, as I drink more tea. We switched to black tea. I finished the green tea. Question 11. In a romance novel, what makes the romance increase and what makes it decrease? Hey, romance authors, how you doing? Hope you're doing good. This is really important. Pay attention. Romance increases in a romance novel not when you tell the reader the characters are more in love. Don't tell them, because that just kind of lets you off the hook from doing the work of showing people in a relationship. It's the difference between, how was work today? It was fine. Versus, how was work today? It sucked and here's why. What makes the romance increase are collective, positive interactions between characters, whether they're sexual, whether they're emotionally intimate, whether they're just casual, whether they're active, whether they're narrative, meaning dialogue, whether they're whatever. Start stacking up positive, beneficial, meaning one or more characters improve somewhere along their arc along the way. Positive, beneficial scenes, beneficial interactions, and there will be a native sense of more romance. Because every time we see these two characters together, they feel feelings and they think thoughts and they do more stuff and they hold hands and they, try not to get murdered by the ninjas or something. That's what makes it increase. Positive, not necessarily an increasing number of, but an increase in positive, beneficial, forward-moving interactions. It builds to certain things, whether that's typically in hetero romance, we're building to sex scenes. In different flavors of sexual interest, sometimes the sex is the given and we're building towards intimacy. Every story's different. Every writer's different. But we want to show a positive progression, here to here to here to here, moving us forward so that we get a sense of, oh, well, they're spending more time together, they're hanging out, they're sharing more intimate things, they're doing more intimate things. They must be more and more romantic. And then eventually a character thinks thoughts or feels feelings or does stuff and expresses how they feel, and we see the romance verified. I want to answer this question first. Would that be the same if it was the B plot of fantasy? Yes. This is whether it's an A plot or a B plot or even a C plot. If it's a plot, this is true. It doesn't suddenly change just because it's not the main thrust of the book. The reason why I'm calling out romance authors is because these are the people with whom the romance increase is like their bread and butter. But if you've got a B plot, a romantic B plot, this whole thing applies to you too. And it doesn't matter if it's a B plot in fantasy or action or whatever. A plot, B plot, universal rule. But what makes romance decrease? Not to be too clickbaity, but the answer might surprise you. It's not the absolute opposite of the thing that made it increase. That's the tricky part. Just because we have negative scenes between characters does not mean the romance has decreased. What makes romance decrease are all the things that prevent further positive beneficial events from happening. So the romance can, over a long enough timeline, decrease if, instead of having our two characters get together and hang out or take their pants off or get busy or sweat or do whatever, if instead of doing that, you've bogged the reader down with all this other plot stuff. Oh, we're going to go follow the antagonist for a minute. Oh, I got to give you a backstory chapter with a flashback in it. Oh, I got to put them on this other B plot for a hot second. Whatever it does that takes us away from the opportunity to see the characters get closer together is what decreases the romance. If you keep doing it, if you keep stacking a million billion different things between your romantic interludes or your romantic moments, you are saying the romance is less important because it doesn't occur that frequently in the book. I'll say that again. If you have stuffed a million billion things between romantic scene number 1 and romantic scene number 2, you're not saying that the romantic scenes suddenly matter more. You're saying that they don't matter as much because look at all this stuff that was also going on in between them. It's sort of like when you have a movie, and in that movie you suggest that there is a certain plot, but you spend the majority of your movie not dealing with that plot. What message does that convey to your audience? Let's put it into another book term. You swear up and down that you're writing an action thriller, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of action in your story. Or it's a murder mystery, but there's no murder and barely any mystery. What happened? Where did the thing go that's supposed to define your stuff? Romance decreases when you reduce romantic opportunity. Romance increases when the consequences of romantic opportunity are positive, beneficial things for one or more characters involved. Now, because I know one of you out there is thinking this, no, it does not only and always have to increase. It can, but you don't always have to start at like 0 and then go along to 100. You don't always have to move upward. It can be sawtooth. It can wobble. You can go up a couple times and come down a few times and go up a few times and come down a few times and look like one of those heart monitor chart things. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be one straight line moving in one direction. It can be a lot of different things. You can do this, but you got to pace it out. You got to figure out what the scene is that's doing the romantic stuff, that's developing your romance B-plot, and then figure out if it's a positive, beneficial thing. Does it help my characters along their arcs? So if they're in a romantic B-plot, let's use your thing as an example. If they're in a romantic B-plot, that B-plot has to have a beginning, middle, and an end because it's a plot, because it's an arc. So if it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, you have to be able to point to scenes in your story that's the beginning, and middle, and end of this romantic subplot arc. That's the very least you need to do. 1, 2, 3. You can stretch that out and add 4, 5, 6, 7, 22, 55, a million, whatever. But you got to be able to point to, okay, this scene, I'm going to make numbers up, scene 22, here's the middle of their thing. Or this is installment number 5 in their series of 12 or whatever. You should be able to point to the scene that is the romantic installment of the B plot. And you should be able to, in that scene, point to the benefit the involved characters get. And not just like, oh, that character has sex and that character watches or whatever. Like, it's not just tick the box in terms of what they do. That's part of it, but not all of it. This scene is the two of them getting together, and it allows character A to open up and feel more feelings and allows character B to relax. You need to be able to point to those consequences along that B plot, along those scenes, along the course of the arc, so that you can figure out whether you need to, rewrite it, rebuild it, strengthen it, or adjust it in some way. It's a bit more complicated and takes some more time as a B plot, but it's worth it. I hope that makes sense. If not, let me know. I'll re-explain it. But now, I'm going to get another mouthful of tea, and we'll tackle our last question of the night. We flew tonight. Wow. That might be my fault. I've been kind of flying just to conserve energy. All right. On we go to the last question. Whew. Gentle advice. Question 12. How do I take my first draft and turn it into the best second draft I can? Okay. Roll your sleeves up. This is going to get a little technical. We're going to start with this. Figure out, if you haven't already, figure out a scene list. What scene happens in what order, and number them. That's important. The more architecture we can develop going into our second draft and through our second draft, the easier this is going to be. So if you've already done one, you don't have to worry about this. But if you just wrote, you just get it all out on the page, vomit it out there, and just write, and whatever it is whatever it is. Now's where you start sort of dividing it up and finding scenes and figuring out the order of scenes. Okay? Just make a list. You don't have to take a pair of scissors to anything or something. Just make a list. Scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, all the way through the book. It does not matter how many scenes you have. There's no magic number for scenes, remember. We just need a list. Okay? Once that's done, we're going to make 2 more lists, okay? Next list. And honestly, you can do these in any order, but this order works for me. This is the order I teach, but you feel free to do whatever order you want. You make your scene list. From there, you're going to list all your characters. All of them. From main character and antagonist all the way down to Billy the kid in one sentence of one chapter. You're going to make a list. And you're going to try, and this might take some time. You might have to think about this, but you're going to prioritize your characters. Put all the big heavy hitters, the most commonly appearing, the biggest deals in your book, put them near the top of the list. And Billy, who shows up in one sentence in one chapter, goes near the bottom of the list. Optionally, if you really want to get better at this and give yourself a significant boost, in this list of characters, we're going to add some columns to it. Add a column for when they show up in the book. What scene, what chapter, when do they show up? Try to nail this down. 2, if they're throughout the whole book, just say they're in the whole book. But if they make periodic appearances, make a note of all the times they show up. So your main character might be in the whole book. You don't need to put anything in a column for them. But somebody who shows up in chapter 2, chapter 6, chapter 15, chapter 35, that's worth noting why there's a big-ass gap in the middle of the book where they don't make an appearance. We're doing that to see if some of these secondary characters need to be more involved in the story or it can be cut, because let's say they only make 2 appearances. Do we really need them then? So we want to make an accounting of when the characters are in what scenes. When do they show up in the story? We're going to add another column past that. What are they doing in the story? What are they here for? Obviously, your main characters are the main characters. Your antagonist is your antagonist. But what are the goals of the other characters? What are they here to do? And if you want to come at this from a writerly standpoint and say like, oh, that's the character who gives our hero the magic weapon. Fine. Whatever makes sense for you. This is just for you. The reader's not going to know this. This is just for you. Or if you want to take it from a more like narrative composition way and say something like, you know, Edward is in the story because he wants to understand the meaning of royalty. If that works for you, that works for you. But you got to have something, because you got to be able to look at this list and go, okay, Kevin, you only make 3 appearances in this book. You don't really seem to be doing anything really important. You seem to disappear after about chapter 5. Kevin, you're gone. See ya. This is going to help frame what the characters do and who survives, and by extension, what scenes may or may not need to go or be reshaped as a result. This is going to help tighten things or expand things as needed. Okay? Next list. I need you to go back to your, in conjunction with your scene list, I need you to start identifying your arcs. In what scenes, this is why I wanted you to number them, in what scenes do you do the main plot? In what scenes do you do your B plots? Now, here's the wrinkle, here's the tough part. Not every scene needs to be represented here. And not every scene needs to do everything. You don't need to have scenes that are both main plot and B plot and other B plot and C plot. Sometimes scenes are neither of those things, none of those things. And sometimes that's okay. This is situational. The goal here at this level is to just produce the list, not judge the list. Just produce the list. We can judge it in a hot second when you're done. But for right now, we are just trying to see the whole story. We're looking for the blueprints. What scenes do we have? The main A plot of the story is in this scene, however many scenes, right? The romance B plot is in scenes 2, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, and 45. Whatever. The other B plot, same deal. C plot, same deal. Whatever. That's going to let you know just by looking at it. Not so much if it's good or bad, but, oh, I have this B plot that's only really in like one scene. Maybe I don't need it. We're just looking for population, number of things. We're not trying to judge it right now. When you get all those lists done, then we judge. Here's what we look for. I start with characters. Granted, every single part of what's about to come out of my face is going to mean you need to rewrite something, whether that's a sentence, a paragraph, a scene, a chapter, multiple chapters, an act, a whole ass book. Rewrites happen because you're going from first draft to second draft, okay? But we're going to start with characters. Look for characters that have a low population. That's the technical term. They're barely in the story. Go through and see if they really need to be there. Like, absolutely, positively need to be there. Billy, the guy who bags the groceries, needs to be there because that's part of the scene. Sure, legit. But a secondary character who's just there to have one conversation that doesn't really move the plot forward, doesn't really tell us anything about the character, they're just sort of there taking up space. Do they really need to be in the story? Really? Really? Cut them. Especially if your first draft was like vastly larger than the word count goal you're aiming for. Because I know authors out there were like, I'm going to write an 80,000 word romance novel. Like they say that. And then their first draft is like 190 million words. You know, it's an 85,000 word thing. I've written twice that much. What do? Go look at your characters, see who's in the story. Go look at your scenes. That's the next thing we're going to look at. Look at scenes. This is why we made that scene list that tracked our arcs and our plots, remember? Scenes that don't do anything, they're going to be the first thing we want to cut. Scenes that just seem to take up space, that don't easily connect other dots, they feel random or disjointed, why are they there? We're also going to look at B plots and C plots and D plots, if you have them, that are so poorly represented with such a low population, meaning they only show up once on your list, that we don't know what the hell they're doing in the book. Sometimes these are plot threads you started writing and then you kind of just dropped because you were like, I'll get back to it, and you decided you didn't like it, but you, whatever. That's fine. But this is where they get cut. The goal here at this stage is to make sure the story gets told and is not starved for detail. We are not trying to make the barest, thinnest skeleton possible. We do not want a skeleton. We want a story. So some of this stuff, some of the fat, some of the material that isn't totally smooth and perfect, this is why we don't cut plot. We just focus. Some of that stuff has to stay here. Not all of it, some of it. Especially if you've got 190,000 words, you're trying to get it down to 80. Things are going to get cut. Once you shape those things, your characters and your plot, you can start to see sort of a Swiss cheese kind of vibe with your draft. You know what to fill and you know what to cut. Well, what do you fill those holes with? You've got some choices. You can fill that in with more stuff, material, words, to give your reader more understanding about your character. You can fill some of them in. Now, again, this is situational. It's not like automatic that every fifth hole gets world building, but it's situational, so you're going to have to look at your work and make your own best judgment here. But you can fill in some of those gaps with character detail. How's a character feeling? What's a character thinking? What are they planning on doing? How do they, how are they recovering from this, action that happened? Or how do they set this up? Or how do, do they need to do more tasks? You can fill it in with character stuff. You can fill it in with world building. And I don't mean history or lore. I mean, like, describe the goddamn room they're sitting in. It can be simple like that. Yeah, you can totally lore drop if you need to, fantasy author. But it's also important to remember that your character who's having that existential crisis about whether or not they can, reclaim the magic weapon to go fight the big monster, they're having that crisis in a room that the reader should be able to imagine and feel like they're there with the character. So maybe describe that shit. I don't know. It just sounds like a good idea to me. This is going to allow you to have a balance, not 50-50, but a balance somehow between your world building and your plot and your character, which we recognize as the story triangle. This is how you smooth that out. Your second draft takes the mess of your first draft, and I swear to you on toast and butts, please let your first draft be messy. And if you take your first draft to an editor, which is totally legit, please let it be messy. Please let it be all 22 shades of fucked up. Please. The editor doesn't need it to be perfect. The editor wants to help you make it better. It doesn't need to be perfect to go forward. It just needs to be finished and cleaned up. That's not the same thing. But we're going to try to build the best second draft out of the amount of material the first draft left. And if the first draft had big-ass gaps, like, you wrote yourself notes like, fill this in later. Hey, guess what? Later showed up. It's time to fill that in. Sometimes that means there's going to be a third draft. Sometimes that means there's going to be a 10th draft. It's all fine. It's all fine. You get it? I'm nodding my head. You can have as many drafts as you want. It takes however long it takes is what it takes. Okay? Nobody wants a perfect book. Everybody wants a book that will move and affect other people. They want to have a movie in their brain. And that starts in an idea, sort of mushy looseness in the first draft, and begins to take shape in the second. Would cleaned up be identifying all arcs, characters, and scenes? No, I was unclear. Cleaned up means the draft itself, the words on the page, are in their best shape, messy as they might be. Things are spelled right. You've got punctuation. You've got commas, maybe too many, but you've got commas. It looks like a story. That's what cleaned up means. You've taken away all those notes you wrote yourself in the margin. You stopped writing in big parentheses, write something here later. It looks like a cohesive story. If you were to print it out and hand it to a person, they could read it pretty much without issue. It might not be good yet. You might need to do more work on it, but it doesn't look like a file under construction. That's what cleaned up means. I apologize for being unclear about that. Good question. But I'm going to tell you, identifying all your arcs and characters and stuff makes cleaning up your draft a hell of a lot easier. Oh, man. I can tell you editorially, it's one of the first things I do. Like day one, get a thing over 40,000 words. I immediately grab a steno pad like this one and immediately start making a list. What characters are in it? What are my scenes? How many scenes are there? What happens in each? Like I start taking everything apart. And then that's even before I start breaking the manuscript up into like pieces I will edit. The more organizing you can do, the more prep you can do here, the greater your mise en place, the more successful your meal development will be. You do your prep first, so your job is simpler later. That's how you make your best second draft. Are there any other questions about anything? Else, we will march on out of here to the outro. That's oui chef like OUI. It's French. But yeah, I get you. I see what you're doing. Nothing? Anything? Yes? No? Else we will march forward and get out of here. I think we should get out of here before I start coughing. To the outro. I'm trying to feel better. Oh, man, I'm doing my damnedest. There's been orange juice and Alka-Seltzer and baby aspirin because I can't take most over-the-counter cold meds. I'm doing the best I can, little by little. All right, to the outro. Louder than I intended. I want to thank everybody for being here. It was really absolutely fantastic. I appreciate your patience with my cold. As I said, I am doing my best to get better. I rested a lot, which is, as anybody knows, difficult for me. Thank you for letting me talk about draft making and discovery beats and everything in between, and answering your questions and talking a bit about Thor Ragnarok. I'm excited for the next Thor because, well, it looks visually interesting to me. And I'm always a sucker for a good hero movie. If you have any other questions that I didn't answer, or you want your question answered for next week at the next chat, which is going to be on May the 4th. We'll have to do like a Star Wars theme thing, I guess. Oh no, what am I going to do without, getting a DMCA strike? We'll see what happens. But if you want your question answered, the best thing you can do is jump over to patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate. $2 a month gives you access to hundreds of hours of content and material to help you further tell your stories better, as well as access to the Discord, where you can leave all the questions you want, and I'll be more than happy to answer every single last one of them when it comes time to generate questions for the chat. I want to thank everybody for being here. All power to all people. Please wear a mask, wash your hands, so that people like me don't pick up a sniffle and then, fall off the face of the earth. I love you all. I'll see you next week for May the 4th and other War of Stars related things. I'll talk to you very, very soon. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves. Tell somebody you love them. Do something that feels good. Have a glass of water. And I'll talk to you very, very soon. See ya.